So this is kind of, where we are today, right? June 2022. The question is, how did we get here? How do we get here? For young people, this is pretty much all they know. If you're 20 or younger, you grew up in a world where gay marriage was a fact of life, where homosexuality was omnipresent on the television. And, but people like me, I'm only in my 40s, so I'm not that old, but this is all very, very new. I mean, I grew up at a time where this was still very, very taboo, and there was a very different conversation about it, which we will also get to as we go through, because again, there's been a very, very rapid and very radical shift in the discourse, which is important for Muslims to understand if they're going to be able to conceptualize and respond to this properly. So how do we get here? So this takes us back to the sexual revolution. Now, the sexual revolution begins in the 1960s, late 1960s, and this is sort of the most obvious proximate cause to where we are today. But there are antecedent causes. The sexual revolution, there are, things about it which started to stir in the 1930s, we'll get to this, and then came into full bloom in the 60s. And then even before that, developments that take place from the beginning of the modern period, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries also, laid the groundwork to get to a point where by the 1960s, in Western culture specifically, the sexual revolution almost looks like inevitable. If not inevitable, like it's just waiting to happen, right? And then it's waiting for a catalyst to happen. And then catalyst comes about, we'll see, in the form of the birth control pill and other kind of social movements that were afoot in the 1960s. But it's very important to understand the sexual revolution as part of this larger narrative. Now, the sexual revolution is basically, it represents a fundamental rejection of Christian, or more generally Abrahamic, religious, moral norms surrounding gender, sex, and sexuality. So up until the 1960s, at least, the official kind of moral norms in the West were pretty much aligned with Christianity. Premarital sex was very much taboo. It was not something, living together outside of marriage was completely unheard of in the West before the 1960s, at least in America, I think also in Europe as well. You did not just live with someone of the opposite sex outside of marriage. That was just not done. Like in the Muslim world today, it's unheard of. Like it's just not done. People might like have relations, but you don't, it's like hush hush. And it's not something that that's accepted. And it's certainly not something that you just would do so openly. Up until this time, also in the 1960s, people were very reticent about discussing matters that were related to sexuality. So on American soap operas, for example, in the 1960s, you could not even say the word pregnant on public television. Right now, there's nothing really wrong with that from our perspective as Muslims, but the idea was that even that was too forward. It was kind of too direct, and so they used euphemisms. A woman was said to be with child or expecting. You couldn't, if you had a movie in the theater where a woman's chest was shown, bare chest, for like 2 seconds, it was immediately slapped with an R rating. Restricted audiences, no one under 17. Without an adult accompanying them, right? This was considered very shocking. At the same time, you have, for example, pornography was completely forbidden. It was prohibited by law in the West. And I don't just mean pictures or videos. I mean also just written like salacious novels. Even that, like just, written descriptions that were very explicit, where actually you couldn't sell them legally in European capitals and in the United States.